And away we go. It's just me at the moment. Not sure if Eric or Risk are going to join. Either way, the show must go on, if it will allow me, that is. Other than that, let's just jump right into the news. UK targets Russia's shadow fleet and sanctions oil giants. On Wednesday, the United Kingdom government, Rosneft, Lukoil, more than 40 shadow fleet tankers and 4 Chinese oil terminals as part of 90 new sanctions. Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper said the sanctions aim to tighten pressure and make Russia's escalation come at a clear cost, while Rachel Reeves, Chancellor of the Exchequer, said they seek to choke off energy revenues and increase pressure on Vladimir Putin. Russian President's war efforts. Measures against Rosneft and Lukoil include asset freezes, director disqualifications, and trust services sanctions. Rosneft CEO Igor Sechin and Lukoil CEO Vaget Alexperov have been under British sanctions since spring 2022. London said the sanctions are a huge blow to Russian President Vladimir Putin and named India's Nayara Energy Limited, which imported 10 million barrels worth more than $5 billion last year, for EU summit review next week. Earlier this year, the UK joined the US in sanctioning Gazprom, Neft, and Surgutneftgaz, while Defense Secretary John Healey confirmed NATO support and delivery of more than 85,000 weapons to Ukraine. Whatever happens, happens. It is what it is. It was what it was. Either way, life goes on. And I have said what I thought of this many times. I'm still standing by that. Why do nations care what other nations do with their trade? I get it. You don't like what other countries are doing within their own borders, and I know that people certainly do not like what other leaders say. But that does not change anything. Actions speak louder than words. But even with the actions, it's not going to be enough. Nothing is ever going to be enough. That is it. People will continue doing what they can, but everything will remain the same. And of course, given the size of Russia's economy, if Russia is still functioning, to whatever extent it's still functioning, years after sanctions have been put on them, given what their military operations done in Ukraine, who's to say this is the final straw for them? No, the final straw is the moment the sanctions were put in place. Russia is still going on. I'm not defending Russia's government or just Russia in general. I think a lot of people would have noticed by now, especially from Russians living in the country, if there are serious issues, not just economically, but infrastructure, local businesses. I think certain businesses in Russia have been hit to some extent for sure. Yet that is not going to be enough to get a country with a big military and lots of landmass to change its mind. People can still try to make their point, make their stance clear, which I'll give credit for. I respect people for being honest on where they stand. There's a very long game with big economical powerhouses. We shouldn't conform to the big guys because they have the power. I think people have to be smart about what these people are doing. Give them a taste of their own medicine. Go along in life the same way they're going along with life. Because if they're doing it, why can't you? There's no reason to have double standards. There shouldn't be one rule for them and another rule for everyone else. MTV is set to shut down 5 of its stations in the UK at the end of the year. Although its main station, MTV HD, will continue airing its popular reality series like Geordie Shore. There are sure to be more people saying, I want my MTV in the near future. The world's first 24-hour music broadcaster is set to shut down 5 of its UK channels, including MTV Music, MTV 80s, MTV 90s, Club MTV, and MTV Live on December 1st of this year, according to the BBC. The outlet notes that flagship channel MTV HD will remain on air, broadcasting reality shows like Naked Dating UK and Geordie Shore. E! News has reached out to MTV for comment. MTV first launched in the United States in 1981, with a focus on showing the most popular music videos. The first one to air was The Buggles' Video Killed the Radio Star. MTV Europe launched 6 years later in 1987, and by 1997 the UK officially got their own channel. After all these years, saying goodbye to MTV UK will certainly be difficult for some, including former MTV video jockey Simone Angel, who admitted to the BBC that she was really sad, and I'm a little bit in disbelief. And I know it's been a long time coming. We need to support these artists, and we all need to dance again and listen to music. The 53-year-old continued, and I know we do that online in our own little bubbles, but MTV was the place where everything came together. So it really does break my heart. The TV personality also reflected on the early years of MTV in the UK, joking that it was a wild time. It was like being on a school trip without any teachers, she shared. We had so much fun. Plus, the station and its offshoots played an important role in people's lives in the 90s. As Simone noted, MTV Europe was really the forerunner to the internet. We were the most widespread TV channel in the world at that point, she added. We had between 100 and 150 million viewers. And although she knows that it's important to move with the times, that doesn't mean she's not sad about the end of an era. To this day, it's one of the most recognizable brands in the world. Simone said, "Why on earth throw that away? It's not thrown away, but it's just reality TV. That's not what MTV is or should be." Wow. Rest in peace, MTV United Kingdom. But you know what? I have an idea. I've seen the likes of Paramount. I'm not sure about 20th Century Fox, Lionsgate. The point I'm making is, I'm seeing a lot of online streaming services made particularly by specific broadcasters and picture organizations like Paramount, Columbia, etc. Why not why doesn't MTV start their own online streaming service to showcase all of their content and also music videos, because that's what MTV is all about. Every company that produces, or at least every studio that makes content for television, new movies, it's becoming the norm for any studio that's making content for television and movies to have their own online streaming service. Why doesn't MTV do the same? No, I'm not saying it's going to be a profitable success. It's just that if it's coming to a time where television channels are starting to fade away, just like how television kind of replaced or actually overtook the share of people getting their information from the radio, I think the time is better now than never, or better later than never, to start their own streaming service. I don't see why not, and I think there is a market for such content to be showcased on its own standalone platform. Also, on an unrelated note, somewhat related, I've heard talks of the English Premier League wanting to start their own service where they can have most of the rights to showcase all of the Premier League matches. I haven't heard much of that as of recent. But I know French League 1 is making plans to make that happen as soon as possible, given that not many broadcasters are wanting to have the rights to broadcast League 1 matches. That's sad for French League 1, but that's how it is. They don't have Mbappe, they don't have Neymar, and of course, Messi's gone. The reason why people watch French League 1 is because of the big and well-known soccer football stars that played mostly for PSG, Paris Saint-Germain. And now that those well-known brandable players have gone off to other leagues, what makes French League 1 stand out? That is the question. And now, since broadcasters don't want to sign another deal to have the rights to broadcast such matches, the Ligue 1 themselves are now resorted to establishing their own online streaming service of some sort of equivalent as to get some kind of revenue to be generated, which can then be reinvested back into the clubs competing in France's top flight soccer football league. So back to MTV UK shutting down. It's sad, but of course there comes a point in time when things change, not for the better, but certainly not for the worse either. And if studios, companies, or organizations, if they stay in their lane for far too long, they will fade to irrelevancy, and they will fade out of dominance within the industry. You have to change with the times, even if you do not like it. The best way for any of our favorite channels, studios, companies to stay afloat is to think ahead towards the next 5 years at least, and think about how can they continue providing their service to people given the changes in societal and technological landscapes. It's very important that people running a business or a startup, they realize that as soon as possible. It is, in my opinion, the bare minimum. It has to be acknowledged. Something has to be done as soon as possible. Lack of weather data due to Trump's budget cuts impacted forecast for deadly Alaska storm. One person is dead and two are missing after the remnants of Typhoon Halong flooded Yukon Coquin Delta villages, including Quiglingok and Kipnuk, displacing more than 1,000 people. The National Weather Service reported hurricane force winds topping 107 miles per hour in Kuzelvak, Alaska, while forecasters said missing weather balloon data complicated predictions for former Typhoon Halong. 37 homes in Quiglingok were lost, and U.S. Coast Guard crews, Alaska Army National Guard, and Alaska Air National Guard rescued more than 50 people and 2 dogs. On Monday, officials said the Kipnuk Airport runway was cracked, power and water system failed, and Yukon Kuskokwim Delta communities need immediate state and federal aid. Erosion and melting permafrost have long threatened the region, prompting officials to urge investment in erosion mitigation and infrastructure, as this may be the largest off-the-road National Guard response in about 45 years. Goodness me, that is not good. And I'm not just talking about the lack of weather data. I'm also talking about, and I know people will have their opinions on this a lot, why doesn't the state of Alaska has their own department for collecting weather data? I understand that there may not be enough funds to fund such an operation at a particular state level, but I know for sure that anything is possible. Even people say that it can't be done. You never know if things become a reality if you don't try something new. I don't think what I'm saying for this story, I think says the same word regarding the tariffs that the United States are putting on other countries. If people having concerns about affordability of getting goods and services traded back and forth. If you can't afford to move goods and services back and forth between other countries in the US, what other plan is there besides the US? Are there other countries that nations can trade with? And what deals in terms of trade can they negotiate? Also, what facilities do they have that they can produce for themselves, which then can be exported to other countries as means to generate extra revenue, which can be reinvested to services within that country? And I think this is just as relevant in terms of the lack of weather data going on in Alaska. Whilst it's important that the federal level provides their weather data to report back to experts, officials, and anyone that urgently needs the data to understand what weather warnings are to come about, you can't just rely on one department. You can't rely on one organization to understand and prepare for warnings that are yet to come. I think there has to be a state level organization for collecting weather data as well as a federal level organization for weather data. Only relying on the federal level, although useful and handy and does get the job done, Trump has said that he's wanting to make cuts for particular key services, and especially with the government shutdown, if nothing gets passed in Congress or the Senate, then government services are just not going to operate. And I think that's what we're looking at now. The over-reliance of federal level services. Although crucial and important, that does not mean you should be reliant on federal level government services. I think each of the 50 US states should have something of their own in case the federal level does not comply with such particular state in question. But that's just me. I think it's important that there are other alternatives in case something at the federal level does not go down well. It's just concerning. Of course, the people who've lost their lives because of the lack of weather data I will say, rest in peace to them. And I send my condolences to the friends and family of those people whose lives were lost in the aforementioned relevant weather disasters that has struck the state of Alaska and beyond, if any. This says is really opening a lot of people's eyes. If not now, possibly in the future. You cannot rely on one organization for everything. There should be an alternative, specifically at local level, even when funding for a local or state level department or an organization may be limited. That does not mean you should not do it. It's worth putting effort into something than doing nothing at all. New investigation finds that certain protein powders contain unsafe levels of lead. Consumer reports found that certain plant-based protein powders contain unsafe levels of lead. The Naked Nutrition's vegan mass gainer protein powder have the highest level as the highest lead level at 7.7 micrograms per serving. Experts advise choosing supplements from companies with third-party quality certification and avoiding products with high lead levels, especially for pregnant women and children. Only in America, you will see stories like this. I assume this is in America, in the United States. Yeah, it is in the United States. The food that's served in the United States is criminal. No wonder that more than half the populations are morbidly overweight. And I don't mean to be mean, it's actually true. That is worrying. So unfortunate. So sad. Well, there you go. Another one bites the dust, as they should. Apple on Wednesday announced its new M5 chip along with the new iPad Pro, MacBook Pro, and Vision Pro, with all powered by the new chip. These devices are now available for pre-order, with shipping and in-store availability expected on October 22nd. The M5 chip will allow the new devices to run faster than their predecessors. Apple says the chip has over 4 times the peak GPU compute performance compared to the M4. Johnny Shiroji, Apple's senior vice president of hardware technologies, added in a statement that it ushers in the next big leap in AI performance for Apple Silicon. For the new iPad Pro, Apple tweets that the chip brings up to 3.5 times the AI performance of last year's Pro and up to 5.6 times faster than the iPad Pro with N. Other upgrades include Apple's C1X cellular modem with up to 50% faster cellular data performance and the N1 chip for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and Thread connectivity. Additionally, the new iPad Pro has faster storage, read and write speeds, and faster charging of up to 50% in around 30 minutes. Adding more power to the iPad Pro seems like a logical step for Apple to take, as the tech giant is pushing it to feel more like a laptop. With iPad OS 26, the tablet is getting more intuitive. Windows displays, the preview app, and the ability to create folders for better organization. The pricing starts at $999 for the 11-inch model and $1,299 for the 13-inch, with color options in black and silver. Ugh, so boring. What happened to red, yellow, lime, cyan? Goodness me. Black, silver, good. Oh, uh, these options for colors are getting so boring, dear. But anyway, that's the point. What happened to Apple, man? If only Steve Jobs was still here. He knew exactly what Apple was all about. And it could have been a lot better too if he was still part of it. But things happen for a reason. Well, just reading what Apple has to announce regarding its devices. Nothing is new, nothing's the same. Well, actually, a lot of things are the same. It's just not that noticeable. There's a difference between models and the models that came before that, and so on and so forth. Which is funny to say, given that I am using a Apple device to record this episode. So they got someone in terms of the marketing aspect. However, anyway, I think that's more than enough to say about Apple. So long as a company establishes its own ecosystem where all devices from the same company, made by the same company, they integrate, and they work together in seamless harmony. People will pay thousands of dollars, pounds, or whatever money they use to get such devices made by Apple. Because what started out as the company driving on innovation and thinking multiple steps ahead, time after time, now it's just becoming a bit of a cash grab for shareholders to make their buck, and it's working. But that's the problem. It's working too well. That's not what it's all about. And if such minds are continuing to push Apple the way it's pushing right now, then we won't see any other further innovations. Even with Samsung, Google, another smartphone manufacturer putting out some kind of new features and functions that are miles better. It's about the aesthetics and the fear of missing out element. That if you don't have this, you're not cool. You're not cool if you don't have Apple. Yeah, I'm looking swag. That's they don't say that, they won't say that directly, but that's the energy they're giving off. And that really shows. It really shows. Yeah, it doesn't get more obvious than that. Scientists hope underwater fiber optic cables can help save endangered orcas. Scientists deployed over a mile of fiber optic cable into the South Sea to monitor endangered orcas and their prey. For distributed acoustics sensing DAS technology, transforms the cable into an underground microphone array to locate whales. The real-time data could help protect orcas by alerting ferries to slow down when whales are nearby. Convenient technology. I know that was something else I was going to say, but nonetheless, this is brilliant technology to not just protect wildlife, it's also for the safety of passenger boats. Because you never know what sea creatures could be nearby that may or may not be a threat to the ship. Not to say all creatures are bad, not saying all sea creatures are bad. However, you never know what's going to happen when traveling by boat, plane, or just driving on the road. So such technology for detecting orcas and whales is brilliant. It's great. I was hoping such technology would come sooner, but hey, it's better later than never. US has $500 million drone security plan for 2026 World Cup. The Trump administration is planning to spend $500 million to secure the skies over World Cup stadiums from drone threats. The White House says the money will be available to all 50 states, but will be focused mostly on the US cities where matches will be played. Currently, only federal level enforcement agencies can intercept or disable drones. Lawmakers have introduced several bills in recent years to grant local agencies this power, but none have passed. The government shutdown has also stalled progress on the most current legislation. How bad does security in a country have to be that you need to have some legislation passed to allow local communities, or at least give a justified and valid reason for drones to secure premises to deter any threats of other drones? You will not hear of such in other countries around the world. Only in the United States that you will hear something like that. I can't imagine if there's any other country that has these similar problems. Mental. I'm surprised not many people are so concerned having this, about having to need such security around public places. It's ridiculous. I don't think that's needed anywhere else. But if it's needed for a particular country in particular places, I think there's a problem with that particular place in that particular country, where particular circumstances and measures are needed for that particular location. This is particularly concerning. Myanmar scam centers. Scam centers in Myanmar, blamed for swindling billions, are expanding rapidly despite a recent crackdown, with new buildings and Elon Musk's Starlink internet service being used. The US Congress Joint Economic Committee has begun investigating Starlink's involvement with the scam centers, which the UN says are run on forced labor and human trafficking. Senator Maggie Hassan has called on Musk to block Starlink services to the fraud factories, where up to 120,000 people may be forced to carry out online scams. Well, looks like Musk is in hot water with this one. Now, if there's anything that Elon Musk is to be guilty of in any relation to what's going on in Myanmar whatsoever, as of this recording, he is the richest individual the world has ever seen. And who's not to say that he doesn't have the money to get the best lawyers to get him out of this mess? And he probably will. However, surely Elon Musk is aware about the sticky situation that he is in, and surely you'll have something to say regarding what's going on in Myanmar and why scam centers in Myanmar are using Starlink internet service. There is nothing mental. Well, either way, is it going to last long? Not for the scam centers, for sure. I think even if such technology has brought so much good to this world, there will be people that will use it for bad intentions. and then people will be blaming the company because the said technology that the company has provided is being used for very malicious purposes, which the company question will condemn. Any actions made by such people using their own technology for terrible purposes. However, how does that stop such malicious people from using such technology for malicious purposes? Tackling this problem is going to take a while for sure. I don't think ignoring this issue is an option. Something will have to be done as soon as possible. There's no way out of this whatsoever. It has to be addressed immediately. Back to the Future, Star Wars poster artist Drew Struzan dies. Oh, that's so sad. Very unfortunate. So unfortunate. Drew Struzan, the artist who created iconic movie posters like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Back to the Future, passed away on October 13th, 2023, after being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. His wife, Dylan Struzan, announced in March that his health was declining due to Alzheimer's and that he could no longer paint or sign autographs. Struzan was a favorite of directors like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, creating memorable images for some of the biggest films of the 20th century. Well, firstly and foremost, rest in peace, Drew. Rest in peace, Struzan. I send my condolences to the friends and family of Drew Struzan, and I've looked at the original posters that he designed, like Indiana Jones, the original Star Wars posters, and of course Back to the Future. It really pops out to a lot of people, and they're still recognizable to this day. But once people start to realize that he's the guy that designed these posters that they've seen all over the place, that's been plastered about around the 20th century and even still recognizable today. Yeah, they'll be sad too, because the impact he has made on the aesthetics of 70s, 80s, possibly 90s movie posters, that's quite an honor and the recognition to have. So yeah, once again, rest in peace. The US passport has dropped out of the top 10 most powerful passports for the first time in 20 years, according to the Henley Passport Index. Asian passports now occupy the top spots, with Singapore having visa-free access to 193 destinations worldwide, followed by South Korea and Japan. The US drop came after losing FIFA access to Brazil in April due to a lack of, well, China has been gaining more visa-free access. Well, I can't say I'm surprised. I had a feeling that the US was dipping down on something, and its passport ranking is certainly one of them. You know, I saw this coming. I may not have been aware too much of it every so often, but I had a feeling that the US is dropping in something, and that just shows it. 4,000-year-old human skull found along riverbank in Indiana. Human remains discovered along a riverbank in central Indiana date back more than 4,000 years, the local coroner stated. In a social media post on Monday, Fayette County Coroner Eddie Richardson said a preliminary analysis confirmed part of a human skull found along the bank of the Whitewater River is approximately 4,270 years old, dating back to around 2,300 BC. A local landowner found the remains in June and made a report with the local sheriff's department, reported WTHR, the NBC affiliate in Indiana. This discovery underscores the importance of our community's vigilance and the necessity of professional collaboration, Richardson said in the social media post. In part, I want to commend the landowner for their responsible action in immediately reporting the finding. Authorities were able to determine the age of the remains with assistance from the University of Indiana Human Identification Center and rigorous testing completed by the University of Georgia. WTHR reported the coroner received approval from the county council to continue with carbon-14 dating to establish a definitive age for the remains. A portion of the skull was sent to Dr. Alexander Cherkinsky at the Center for Applied Isotope Studies at the University of Georgia on September 17. Those results showed the skull is 4,270 years old. Wow. 4,000 years old. That really opens a can of worms about what the Americas was like before colonialism of any nation, from any nation. It's quite a stretch, but that is impressive for sure. Surely there isn't going to be much more stories regarding this particularly. However, it's an interesting find nonetheless. And no matter how long into the future we go into, we will still continue to find more ancient discoveries that no one has ever thought of before, or even knew even existed to begin with. Australia's fertility rate hits record low in 2024. Last year, the Australian Bureau of Statistics reported Australia's national fertility rate fell to a record low of 1.481, deepening the nation's baby recession. Research shows Australia's fertility decline stems from later parenthood, fewer children, and more childless people, with median maternal and paternal ages of 32.1 and 33.9 in 2024. Birth registration figures reveal Western Australia recorded 30,516 births in 2024, a 4.7% fall, while national registration births reached 118. The Centre for Population's 2024 population statement projects that by the mid-2050s, deaths will outnumber local births, and officials say low fertility means more skilled migrants will be needed. Earlier this year, the federal government committed to Medicare rebates for LGBTQIA+ couples and single people accessing assisted reproductive technology amid warnings of greater barriers for same-sex couples. I know both Risk and Eric are going to have very strong opinions on this story, especially the last part about reproductive technologies, LGBTQIA+ couples. Yeah, I have a feeling that they'll have a lot to say on that. And whatever opinions people have regarding fertility, the latter factors to why fertility is so low, I don't think people are outraged enough about preserving their own bloodline. Even when there's people saying that we need to have more children, we can't have any more foreigners coming into our country to outnumber the native population. Well, if you care so much about that, what are you going to do to improve its fertility rates? I haven't heard much about fertility in a while. I'm certain, and I know damn well that there isn't going to be much discussions about fertility for a long time. At least in a positive sense. We're still going to hear that fertility is on the decline. And nothing is going to improve until things improve. That doesn't make any sense. I don't believe there's any research tackling fertility in general, let alone fertility decline. Why it's happening? Why is fertility declining? And what can people do to ensure that fertility goes back up again? Maybe they could take advice from people in African countries. Their fertility is doing great. They're having more children than they can count, for the most part. Good for the Africans, but not so good for everyone else that aren't producing or building up their families and bloodlines at the same rate as Africans in general. That is frightful. Very frightening. I hope there is research that looks into why our fertility is declining, and what can we do to ensure that fertility in developed nations can go back up, ensuring that we preserve the cultures that these countries have once built on and preserved for as long as they can have preserved for. It's again very concerning. I don't think there's enough outrage for fertility rates in the slightest. And that is the episode.